Hi everybody. Okay, so this is going to be the second devlog, and I know in the last video I said that we'll be talking further about level design, but I totally forgot that the early access game was going to be released this week, and at the time of filming it was released yesterday. Well, technically like midnight. And I have a lot to say. I just wanted to take time to talk about the things that I liked and I did not like in the game now that it's like fully out and everybody's gonna be playing it anyway. It's just different when a lot more people are looking at the game than just your close circle of friends. So the embarrassment is hitting. Firstly, I want to say a couple of people started playing it immediately after it was released and they fell into a lot of bugs that I had never seen before. Like one of them was this one scene loaded 5 or 6 times at the same time. So there were like 6 of the same player and basically like 6 of the same exact object like in the same scene. So everything was just oversaturated and crazy looking. There were some instances where like the player clipped through the edge colliders I was using for the maps. Because of that, like the player got stuck. I don't know, maybe I should use like a different more concrete collider because edge colliders are just lines that you can easily clip through, whereas like a box collider is a whole box and you can't just like spawn into that. On the other hand too, there were some things that were totally avoidable. Like I was a bit messy with like the way I sorted the sprites. I definitely could fix like little minor icks like that. Sometimes like I don't know how I've combed through the code to look for that one line, but I just haven't seen it. Maybe I haven't looked like deeply enough, but when you press the space bar, the game loads, like a new game is loaded. How does that happen? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But it's messed up and I hate it. Sometimes to move through scenes, I have a little box collider that you can enter, and then that signals that a different scene should be loaded. Sometimes that collider just disappeared. Damn. Damn. Yeah, well, that's basically why the game's free for now. And when you walk out, like towards the part of the map where you're supposed to leave the map, it's like nothing happens. Those issues don't happen in the editor in Unity, but in the build it does. And I actually googled that up. That's probably because my code sucks. It's most likely because I'm not writing my code in a way that like after this one thing, this thing should happen immediately. Like I should use more events and actions to trigger things instead of relying on like constantly checking for a certain thing every frame. For example, I do know that I've relied on the update method way too many times. So that's why maybe when one thing is triggered, the code doesn't have enough time to check for that thing, or maybe a certain frame is skipped. So I should definitely make everything more linear in terms of the code. I'm honestly so glad that I released the game as early access and it's free so far because it is really buggy. There are a lot of issues with the game, to be honest. Like, as much as I absolutely love some aspects of it, there is obviously a lot to improve on. So yeah, now that I've finished with the prefacing, I wrote in my computer a couple of things that I liked and didn't like about the game. So for every pro, I have a con. Let's start off with the most obvious thing that I like about the game. It's the great visuals and atmosphere. I spent a lot of time working on a specific style for the game and adding lighting to make it really pretty. I really liked that. I'm very proud of that. And a lot of people, like the first feedback I get for the game is it looks really pretty. And it looks different from other games, and I really, really like that. So I'm gonna keep putting that effort in the full game, obviously. However, in terms of the visuals, the maps do feel kind of dead sometimes, especially in places like the city center. It just feels dead because you can't really interact with anything in the map. There's no NPCs that you can talk to, and you see that in every other game of the same genre. So I need to add more characters and interactability. and really convince the player that they're in a fully formed world. Also, something that I need to improve on is the lighting system that I use. I'm really only using the very basic universal render pipeline. I'm just using those like 2D sprite lights and stuff and point lights and whatever. And for the shadows, I forgot what it was, but it was this attachable script where you can like manipulate this polygon to a certain shape, but it's not a good script to use for a moving object like the player, for example, because you get really clanky shadows, and again that just like messes with the visuals and like totally ruins the flow, to be honest. For that, I heard that there's a better way to deal with that, and that's using meshes. They're just more realistic, so I'll be tinkering around with that. Okay, so for my second pro, I wrote that generally speaking the game did run smoothly and there was nothing that would absolutely break the computer, but like I'm not so sure about that anymore. The cons, there's a lot of cons when it comes to the code, to be honest. So there were some bugs where inventory would disappear in the wrong places or where you couldn't exit the map. So yeah, basically what I said. And then there were some other like parts where I could have been more attentive. You know, like there were some past assets that where I forgot to like add a certain script. And I definitely should have reviewed all of that much more attentively. Another pro, great music. But like I didn't work on that. My friend Agnesa did. I wrote that I could have more sound effects and a better use of the music in the world. My fourth thing that I liked about the game was that the puzzles were solvable. Like they were challenging enough to make the player think about it, but they were solvable. About that, that's debatable. I really want to know what you guys think about that. If you guys were stuck on one puzzle for like over 10 minutes or something, in that case, that would really suck. But please let me know about that so I can improve on that. In the cons, I wrote the instructions could be more clear, prevent the user from wandering around aimlessly too much. So yes, that's a big issue in the game. I should definitely have some sort of pointer in the environment, or maybe even circling back to the last con, some NPC that will nudge you towards understanding a puzzle better. On top of that too, there's no sense of direction in the game. Basically what I wanted was for there to be as little words as possible in the game, just so you took visual clues from the environment as much as possible instead of relying on somebody to outright tell you what to do. I realized that that's really tricky and challenging, and I feel like at my stage I should rely on verbal hints a lot more, because just saying something visually is very tricky. I guess for more specific things I should definitely make things a lot more verbal. So yeah. Likeable characters. I think the characters are not unlikable, but you guys let me know what you think about that. I haven't gotten any feedback saying that, oh, I absolutely hate this one character. I want to keep the atmosphere like nice, lighthearted, funny, but you guys let me know if you felt that too in the game, or if there's anything I can improve on. In the cons, I wrote there's not enough bonding with the characters. Again, there's just not enough clarity in the story itself. Again, I was relying on visual cues too much. I wrote it's not a convincing enough world, linking back to my last cons that I wrote about. And the player may be confused over who plays what role in the game. For example, does the player really know that in this home scene the people around you are your family? Does the player really know that this cat that you want to talk to in the park is your best friend? Are you aware that the enemy, the cult that you're supposed to be fighting against, are you aware that the leader of that cult is your uncle? I honestly don't think so. I feel like I could have been a lot more clear with that. Second to last pro, I wrote that the map design was okay. And I wrote that it's okay because it could have definitely been worse. Because like my first maps were really boring, and they've definitely improved. And they've synced a lot better with my style. But an improvement to this would be that I want to add bigger maps, firstly to convince the player that they're living in a real world, and secondly so I can minimize as much scene loading as possible. And then in the early access game too, there was some like really weird issues with the scene loading where the screen would go like black and then fade back to transparent. There are some maps that are just circular where I could have added maybe a certain street or an alleyway or something that you could crawl into and explore more. It just wasn't as engaging, and it's supposed to be a game where you explore, right? It's supposed to be open world to an extent. I want to make the map designs more challenging and artsy and just unique and original. And I think I'm achieving that with the map designs I'm working on for chapter 2. Okay, the last pro I have was that the mechanics were clearly introduced, but I'm not so sure about that anymore. Well, by that I meant that the health bar and the duduk were introduced clearly, like they were outright written out what purpose they serve in the game. So I think that was clear. But for other things, maybe it wasn't so clear. For example, I made sure that any bright red object in the game, or just like some object with a red tint in the game, is interactable in terms of like playing musical notes to unlock something. But I did not outright say that in the game, and I don't think everybody's going to pick up on that because it's a very subtle design. And then secondly, I think it looks so ugly, the health bar and the inventory design, and it doesn't feel like a normal game either. So I need to find a way to like, maybe it's something as simple as making the health bar and the inventory items smaller, or maybe having a separate page for the inventory, just something that won't bother the player when they're walking around the map, so they can look at the art more clearly too. It should be user-friendly too, because in the screen on one side is the inventory items and on the absolute opposite side is the duduk. It's just annoying swiping from one side of the screen to the other, because you use both of those mechanics quite often in the game. It should be more user-friendly and compact in a way. So in conclusion, the things that I absolutely loved about the game were the art, basically, just the lighting, the art style. I absolutely loved that about the game, and it seems like everybody else did. It's what hooked people mainly to play the game in the first place. And then the weak points were obviously the game development itself. My code sucks. Like, let's be so honest, it really sucks, and I could do better. And then the design, the game design, could definitely be improved on. The world building, story writing, I need to get better at all of that. I definitely also need to comb through the game a lot harder and make sure that every little detail is in the right place, because even just like the littlest detail being out of place really messes with the player experience. It really sucks too to have a bug like that in the game, because then it just makes the player more untrusting of the game itself, because then they'll just be looking at everything like, oh, is this actually supposed to be here, or is it like a part of the game after all? And I really don't want that, obviously. I mean, it's quite obvious that these two would be my pros and cons, because art is something I've been studying for over, I think, my 7th or 8th year, whereas just the whole game field and like game development in general, I've been getting into over the past 2 years only, and this is like my first large-scale project like that. So obviously that's going to be my weak point, and obviously that's something I should pay a lot more attention to. Yeah, that's basically it. But before you leave, I wanted to say that I'm gonna be working on a website. There I'm gonna have a page where I'll add all the bugs and everything, just so if you have some sort of feedback, you'll know if it's already been reported or not. And if it hasn't, let me know, please. And I'll add that to the site. Please play the game. Please give me feedback. It really does help me learn. Yes. I think that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for your time. Please play the game. And please give me feedback. All right. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.